Hello everyone and welcome back to Lotus Premier Education. My name is Amanda and I want to be your college tutor. Today we're going to be talking about the difference between informational interviews and admissions interviews in the college process. This is a really important topic of conversation because students are not aware that there's been a big change in college admissions where they're now offering informational interviews. And we're going to talk about how to prepare for each one of these interviews. So first and foremost, when you have an interview coming up with a school, you need to figure out, is it an informational interview or is it an admissions interview? And the best way to do that is to talk about the differences. So an informational interview is basically when you meet with a current student or even an admissions officer, but that's a little bit more rare. It's usually someone who's working in the admissions office. Sometimes it could be an alumni, but an informational interview is when you meet with someone to ask your questions. Now, why are informational interviews valuable? They're valuable because they show your interest in the school. They show that you have done your research. If you're taking the time to schedule this, it means that you are really interested in the school because they know that you're busy students. You have a lot on your plate. So carving out time for these interviews is really a message to them that you are interested in the school. So whenever possible, you do want to sign up for an informational interview as a way to check off another piece of demonstrated interest. Now, when you sign up for this interview, you should be aware that this is a chance for you to ask questions that you have about the school. They are not going to be asking you questions. And so this is something that is very different for students as they try to prepare for these meetings. If you have an informational interview that is question-based, you should prepare between 5 and 7 questions for your person. Ideally, before the interview meeting, they will let you know if it's a current student, if it's an alumni, if it's an admissions officer. Obviously, the questions can change a little bit based on who is asking you the questions or who's going to be speaking with you. If you're speaking with an alumni, you can, of course, ask about their time at the university and how things have changed. If it's a current student, they're going to give you the best knowledge of what life is really like right now. If it's an admissions officer, your questions may be a little bit more formal because you know that it's going to be someone who's reading your application. Now, if they don't tell you in advance who your interviewer is, just come prepared with a few different questions and you can adapt them in that current moment. Now, one thing students will ask me quite a bit is, what types of questions should I ask in these interviews? And that's very hard to respond to because it depends on a lot of things. It depends on who your interviewer is, as we just discussed, but it also depends on the school itself, and it depends on what you value as a student. A few general questions that we recommend that are always great to hold on to for these situations are questions like, can you tell me about your advising programs at this school? Can you tell me about any resources that are only available to freshmen? You can tell a lot about how much emphasis a school places on their student experience by how much time and investment they put into the freshman class. For example, at some schools, there is an entire office dedicated to just the freshman experience. There are budgets dedicated to just freshman planning and events. And there are spaces on campus that are reserved only for freshmen. What this does is it allows you to really bond with your class before you start moving through the years. And this changes your level of relationships within the school. Versus other schools will just put freshmen in with the rest of their student body. And now you're mixed in with students who really know what they're doing, who already have friend groups established, and it creates a different start to your college experience. So one question you can always ask is, can you tell me what resources you have dedicated only to freshmen, or what experiences you have reserved only for freshmen? Another question you can ask is, what is one thing you think your school does really, really well, something that they're excelling at, and what's one thing that you think they could do better? This is a great question because it forces your interviewer or your admissions officer, whoever you're speaking to really think about both sides of the school, where they excel and where they might be failing a little bit. And that shows them that you are doing your research. In the college process, it's really easy to kind of approach things with wide eyes and excitement. But if you're looking at the whole picture of a school, what they do well and what they need to work on, you're showing them that you're mature and that you're really making decisions based on what is the right fit for you. So those are a couple questions that you can start with, and then you want to tailor your questions more to the experience that you're looking for. If you're someone who really values service opportunities on campus, you can ask how students dedicate their time and where community service can be found. If you're someone who really values pre-professional learning, you can ask about career services on campus and how students are prepared to enter the professional world. We do recommend that you balance the amount of questions you ask about this because you want to make sure you're focusing first and foremost on your time at the school versus your time as soon as you graduate. Another thing that you can keep in mind when you're asking questions is the dynamic of the conversation. If the person you're speaking with seems really fun and open and you guys make a great connection, you can start asking them more about some of the things that they personally valued and get more intimate and personal with some of the questions you're asking about their experiences. If there's someone who's a little bit more formal, keep your questions more formal in return. You do want to make sure that you have done your research on the school before either interview, whether it's informational or whether it's an admissions interview. It's never a good look for you to run out of things to ask, for you not to have specific questions about the department that you're interested in. And even if it's an interview where you're expected to be asking the questions, your interviewer could always ask you why you like the school or why you're interested in the school. And you should have an answer to that question prepared regardless. Now, one thing to keep in mind, even if it's an informational interviewer, thank yous are really highly valued. So please make sure you send a thank you within 24 hours. Sometimes for informational interviews, they won't give you the person's name or email directly. So you would just send a thank you to the admissions office for the experience and let them know that it was a great conversation. Remember that no matter how casual or informal an informational interview may appear, it is still an interview. So you want to make sure you use good language, no curse words, no things that are too casual. You want to make sure that you dress appropriately and that you're putting your best foot forward. And you want to make sure that you practice your speaking skills. Try to always be making eye contact, avoid things like and And if you really need time to think about something, whether it's a question that you're asking or a question that they have asked you, pause, say, that's a great question, or I need a second to think, and think before you speak. It's okay to take some time to collect your thoughts. So that is the first part of our video on informational interviews. These are becoming much more popular in the college process. Their biggest role is to support your demonstrated interest narrative. So if they are available at schools, it's a great idea to sign up. And it's also a great idea to sign up before they get taken. These interviews are very popular and schools have limited resources. The second type of interview that you may see is an admissions interview or an alumni interview. These are usually offered, not always, after your application has been received and schools are already considering you as a candidate. These interviews are usually once they need a little bit more information about you or just want to add more context to your application. The biggest thing to remember about admissions interviews or alumni interviews is that their opportunities for these interviews are very limited. It depends on who is giving back to the school and who has the time to be doing these interviews. So if you don't get one, it does not mean that you are not being considered. If you do get an alumni interview or an admissions interview, you often have a very small window of time to prepare. So we at Lotus Premier Education recommend that you begin preparing for these well in advance. Now, the first way to prepare for an alumni interview or an admissions interview is to make sure that you collect your data. This is going to be an interview where your interviewer is primarily asking you questions, but that does not mean that you are not in control of the interview. So the first thing you want to do is a data collection. You want to collect information about the school you're interviewing at, what you like about the school, why you would be a good fit, and what are some main things that you want to say in the interview. You also want to write down a list of things you want them to walk away knowing about you. And as we mentioned in some of our other videos, these should be things that align with the school's core values. So for example, if you're applying to a school that is religiously affiliated, they may have values about service or kindness or compassion that are very important. Make sure some of those things are featured in your responses. After you have taken some time to make a list of the core values of the school, the things you like about the school, the things you would see yourself doing, and what you want to say about yourself, then you can do some research into some of the questions that that school usually asks in admissions interviews. These resources are available in several places online, and they're really helpful for you to start practicing. Now, I recommend, if you have someone to practice with, a parent, a trusted adult, or if not, a peer or a friend that you really trust, it's always great to engage in dialogue and be open and receptive to feedback. Like we talked about at the beginning of this video, and we're just going to repeat it because it's a really important part of the process. Before you start answering questions in practice or in an actual admissions interview, make sure you know what you want the admissions officer to learn about you. Because if they ask you about an important academic project or about one of your extracurriculars that meant the most to you, you can answer all of these questions in a way that highlights the things that are most important about you in the admissions process. So you want to start, before you even get into the questions, with information about what you want the admissions officer to know. Then there are a few questions that will often come up in admissions interviews that you should be prepared to answer. For example, when you sit down with someone, they're often going to ask for you to tell them about you. So if someone sits down and says, "Okay, student, tell me a little bit about yourself," you should be prepared with what exactly you want to say there. This is a great opportunity for you to set the tone for the interview. So if you want your interviewer to know that you are a really charitable and intellectually driven person, those are the two characteristics you feature in that first question when they say, "Tell me about yourself." Please use your answer to this question deliberately. Don't start with, an explanation about your pet or siblings or, things that you like to do in your free time. Start with very deliberate answers that you want them to walk away with. Some other common questions will be things like, "Tell me about an extracurricular that has been most meaningful." "Tell me about a time that you failed." "I'd love to hear about a class or a project that was the most important for you during your high school experience." These are all questions that you should be prepared to answer. We have more information on our website about some sample interview questions if you guys want to check those out, but make sure that you are running through a lot of these different options so you're prepared for several different directions that the admissions interview can take. Lastly, it is very common that they will ask you, "Why are you interested in this school?" Please make sure that you are well prepared for this question. Your answer should not be vague, and your answer should also not regurgitate facts and statistics that they can easily find online. Your answer should really place you at the school and show them why you are a good fit for the school and why it's a top choice for you. When you're answering this question, no matter which school it's for, the admissions interviewer should walk away feeling like this is a perfect fit for you, and also that you would choose their school over any other school. And lastly, be prepared with your own questions. As we talked about earlier in this video, it's always a great idea to ask your interviewer at least 2, potentially 3 questions, but you will get a feel for how many questions are appropriate when you're in the meeting with them. Again, in this interview, whether it is informal or formal, most admissions interviews are formal. Dress appropriately, dress professionally, be prepared to speak to your admissions officer, because sometimes these interviews are directly with admissions officers and they can quite literally make a decision on your application after meeting you. So just be prepared for any situation that may occur and really put your best foot forward. And lastly, when you are practicing, try to practice with a person, with a mirror, and with the wall. These are all great ways for you to really examine how you interview in different situations. You can also film yourself if you want to be able to provide feedback, and keep your answers to around a minute in length. This is the human attention span for an answer to a question. So try to answer that question, give an explanation, and go back to it within about a minute. So we hope this video was helpful. Please subscribe to our channel. It's so helpful for us to have you guys subscribe so we can continue providing top admissions quality to you during this process. If you have any other questions or things you want us to know, feel free to like or comment down below on our videos, and we'll do our best to address them. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you guys soon.